Let's talk a little bit about rigging. Someone goes out and they buy a new kayak to go out on Lake Erie or maybe Lake Michigan or Lake Ontario. They want to go fish big water with their kayak. What do they need to do? What does that look like?
Well, the first thing that I would say is if you're brand new to kayak fishing, start with an inland lake. Maybe something that has kind of, the geographics where it's like a bowling alley style, where you can put yourself into a windy situation where it gets a little choppy, but you're still, 10, 15 feet from shore. So if you do get in that situation, you can kind of bail out real quick.
Yep.
And then once you start learning those skill sets, then you can start, expanding offshore a little bit. It's always a good idea to go with somebody experienced, or hire a guide like me. Um, but it really depends on with the big body of water. It really comes down to like the safety gear is the important stuff. Obviously a life jacket, a good PFD, your VHF radio, because a lot of spots you leave shore and your phone's not sending a text message.
Especially if it's wet.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. And a phone tether, because
There you go.
you can't retrieve it 60 foot down.
Yep.
And stuff like that, stuff it's maybe not necessarily gonna make your fishing trip more pleasurable, but it gets you back to your family at the end of the day.
That's more pleasurable.
And then once you get that stuff, it's absolutely, once you get that stuff dialed in, then you can kind of look at the electronics, or maybe a trolling motor with spot lock, or an electric outboard like I have to get to the fish faster. And then kind of build your kayak out like that. But you want to look at the kayak as well, what you're going to be taking out there. It should be, the best way to do it is like a sit on top kayak that's self-bailing. Sit insides can do it, but if it doesn't have the front and back bulkheads, one wave is going to swamp that thing and you're not recovering.
Yep.
You also want something that seals real good, so all your hatches, because most people on inland lakes, they're not taking a lot of water over.
Right.
But on Lake Erie, I mean, every other wave's coming over, so I have to have dry compartments, so I'm not just sitting there filling up my boat. And then, depending on how I want to fish, if I'm going to primarily like jig for perch, or, jig for walleye, or I like to cast, maybe I want something with a bow mount with spot lock, so I can just sit on that spot and do what I want to do. If you're going to tournament fish, or you're going to be chasing walleye like me, I want to get to the fish as fast as I can, especially on tournament day, or like if I have a paying client, I want to be out there as fast as I can, and I want to be back as fast as I can. That way we have the most time to fish,
So
Yeah. So how big of a motor are we putting in these things now, right? I mean, you're saying fast. Are we talking electric motor run on your batteries, right? How fast can you get someplace? I mean, how fast can you get this kayak going? People want to know.
We're not talking your boat fast, but we'll go 6 to 6.5 miles an hour on average,
That's
depending
cooking.
on, for a kayak it's not bad.
Yeah.
And depending on your range and the battery that you're using, and obviously the speed you're going, you can cover good water. For example, like my Torpedo, if I'm just going trolling speed, I can cover 100 miles on one battery. But if I'm fishing the Lute, I'm probably making a 40-mile run over the course of the day, so I'm burning through 3 batteries because I'm full speed. Full speed to the first spot, full speed back. And
Awesome.
I'm trying to capitalize on that. So
Yeah.
the best advice I could say is find a reputable shop, like Raccoon Creek Outfitters, or somebody like that that's actually going to listen to you as a consumer, and not just say, oh, you need this boat. They're going to actually break it down and find your needs and advise you into something that's going to be the best thing for what you're doing.
Yeah. So you're taking water over every other wave. So how do you set those electronics up on your boat? Because they don't like water. So let's get a little bit back into that, and like how you kind of set everything up on your boat so that you can see it, it's useful to you, but it survives too. I mean, we want to survive as humans, but we also don't want to buy electronics all the time.
Exactly. You know, and I had that problem. I killed my active target, I think, because I had the black box in the inside of the hull, and even the driest, most sealed kayak is still going to get condensation and stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so that is definitely something that you want to consider if you are using like a lithium battery in there, or if you're going live scope. Get yourself a Pelican box, or Harbor Freight has decent boxes, you know, for pretty affordable, and do it that way. As far as like the screen and stuff, I've never had any issues with the screens. Even, you know, a couple times you have people make mistakes, they get excited or something like that, and they end up flipping over.
Mm-hmm.
And the electronics, as long as your doors are on and your covers are on and stuff, it's fine. You know, the only issue is like some of them, you know, the SD card slot will open up and you get water in there.
Yep.
Really, the only thing that I do with the wiring is just install like a through hole kit that it's a rubber grommet so that I can drill through the hole, and then I'll use super glue to put the rubber back together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one solid piece, and then, you know, obviously silicone and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just to keep the water out of, you know, the inside of my vessel.
Yeah. All right. Let's go fishing. What does it look like if we're gonna go out and do a little trolling in our kayak?
Well, right now, if we go now, we need a flamethrower.
We're not going now.
But you know, if we're at the boat ramp and we're getting ready to go out, and you know, most of the time trolling is generally the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Not because like trolling's my favorite thing. I do enjoy the scientific side of it, you know, and it puts fish in the boat,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all a tool. You know, trolling, jigging, casting, drifting, it all has its place. So on a kayak, because we're slow moving, I can't just pick up and run 5 miles and try to find some other fish.
Right.
So I need to find those small pockets of those active fish. So a lot of times we'll just troll on the way out there, especially if they're human powered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're already going that speed, might as well throw some lines out. And then when you get your first hit, I mean, you're gonna mark a waypoint, because maybe you've been marking fish for miles,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you came across this quarter-mile section. Those are active fish. Mark that waypoint. That way, if you go, you know, say another mile, and you have no action, you just go back to that waypoint and you're going to catch another fish. Um, and that also gives you the ability to head back there and drift fish, or, you know, jig fish. Like I've been having a lot of fun with like the vertical jigging spoons and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to get a feel for, you know,
Absolutely.
how to effectively use those in deep water. I mean, 40, 50 foot of water, you got a lot of variables
Mm-hmm.
trying to get that thing vertical.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how often do you change your plans when you're out there? You know, what does that plan look like, and then how fluid does it have to be?
So weather plan generally doesn't change, unless we, you know, sometimes Lake Erie doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't just kick up out of nowhere. I mean, if you keep your head on a swivel, you're gonna see that storm coming in, unless it's blocked by a landmass.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so in that situation, obviously we would audible and get the hell off the water, and
Mm-hmm.
we'd have plenty of time to do that. But like on the course of a fishing day, I'm bringing the kitchen sink.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if you know, we find some active fish and the only thing they want is drift fishing or casting. I have the rods, I have all the tackle. We'll just pivot. And basically, like how it works, I'm focused on the client. You know, I'm not out there to fish. I love to fish, obviously, but I love watching my clients catch fish. And it's my job to focus on them so that I can identify their challenges, that I can dial in for them. You
Mhm.
know, well, sometimes they struggle a little bit, or it's just we're using the wrong presentation, and you know, we haven't really verified that they don't want that today yet. You know what I mean? When it gets to that point and the day's kind of getting longer, say we're halfway through the trip, now I'm starting to panic, like this dude's not going to go home with any fish. We need to put some fish in the boat.
Mhm.
So I'll throw out a couple different lines, just a couple different situations, and change it up a little bit and see if I can pick something up. Or I might say, like, hey, keep going that direction. I'm gonna just drop something down real quick right here and see if we can pick them up jigging. So I try to kind of keep them going on the plan until I can identify like what's the next change,
Sure.
and then we just go from there.
All right. Let's say the stars align. We got a fish on our kayak.
That's
What's
hand to
that?
hand
What's that? What's
combat.
that
Yeah,
look
what's
like?
that like? Here we go. You and the fish.
It is controlled chaos
Mhm.
and sometimes uncontrolled chaos. Uh, Especially if it's like a steelhead or something like that that's just going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you've never kayak fished before, if you've never been in a kayak that has rod holders up here or like a fish finder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different variables. Maybe they're snagging on stuff, or maybe we're running a snap weight program, so they don't fully understand how to keep that line tight.
Mm-hmm.
So I gently give them advice as they're fighting the fish,
Mm-hmm.
to try to make sure they're successful with it. And I'm always ready to net the fish if I have to, but I want them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll net your fish if you're about to lose it, but I want you to gain that experience, because it's different from the boats. Like, you just call the net guy, hey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
net the fish.
Yeah.
You're a one man band right now.
We got to bring the rod back here and bring that fish up at the right time, so it's not just coming across the surface and popping off, right?
Yeah.
And then get that net underneath far enough so that we can bring that up. So it's just I think that's why a lot of people attract to it, because if it was easy, you get bored quick, right? If it's you constantly have that new challenge, that new thing to kind of figure out and dial in, it keeps you coming back. And that's really how I evolved from a $450 used kayak, sit inside paddle kayak, to
Mhm.
like that unit you see down there.
Yeah.
It's you're always looking for like the next opportunity to learn, the next opportunity to push the limits. And yeah.
How many rods? I mean, do you run 2 rods when you're out trolling? Is it 1 rod? What does that client do with that other line when they're battling the fish?
So when I first started, I would just throw 2 rods. Here you go. Here's your 2 rods.
Mhm.
And I realized it would take them a lot longer to understand how to control 1 rod, because they're too busy focusing on both. So they're missing key things on that 1 rod.
Mhm.
So now what I do is I start them off with 1 rod.
Mhm.
You're solely focused on that 1 rod. You're focused on where the line's going, how the line's acting, like the details. And then once you get that dialed in, you can switch over. I'll throw you a second rod and you can put it out. And I mean, there is going to be mistakes.
Mhm.
You'll wrap a line in the pedal drive, or even in the motor, or in my motor. It's even after all the time I have out there, once in a while I do it. I did it 8 miles offshore on
Oh
Fairport.
man,
Mhm.
Like, I had an hour to get back. I
going nowhere fast.
wrapped wrapped half a spool in there because I forgot. Like, my third line, I must have had a fish or something. And at the end of the tournament, or if there's weather coming in,
Mhm.
I'll set a timer couple hours before, just to kind of give me a heads up to, like, hey, check the radar, make sure it didn't come in early, push forward. Um, well, my first couple timers went off, and I pushed it to the last timer. I'm like, all right, if I don't go in now, I'm not making it back to check-in, and I'm disqualified.
Mhm.
So I reel my 2 lines in that are up here, reel them in real quick, flip around. I'm barreling down full speed. Maybe get a half a mile, and my motor gives me an error code. And I turn around and I see my third rod that I forgot that was back there, because it's usually up here, so I could see
Right,
them all three
right.
Yeah.
going right into the motor. And
You're like, that's bad.
I mean, it was 2 to 3 footers out there,
Yeah.
and I wasn't in the Titan X. I was in the Slayer, so it's not as stable.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm like, shit, I have a paddle. It's gonna take me 4 hours to get back with a paddle,
Hmm.
And I ended up having to climb back there and pull the motor. But that stuff's gonna happen. It's You want to kind of go out there expecting that there's gonna be something that's gonna go wrong.
Hmm.
But
Sounds like a boat.
yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like a real boat.
But it
But there's
comes
always something,
it
right?
comes down to the reaction, right?
Right, right.
Especially of the guy that's guiding you, because, well, for example, I had one guy that he wanted to switch the handle on the reel, and usually I do that, but I'm like, yeah, go ahead and switch it. Well, as soon as he took the cap off, the cap went down, and his face went white, and it ruined his day. And I'm like, dude, don't worry about that cap.
Yeah.
Like, I'll worry about that cap when we get off the water.
Right.
Right.
You know.
Right. But you got
and
to have
just
plan B out there.
you
Yeah.
just gotta rein them back in, because I don't want you not to catch fish because you're worried about, like, you broke one of my rods. Who cares? Cost of doing business. Let's catch some fish.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, Chuck. About time to wrap up. Anything else you wanted to get to before we let you go here?
Uh,
I know you're
Yeah, you
doing a
got
podcast yourself, right?
Yep. It's doing a
Tell me
great
about
on there
that.
a few weeks ago. That was a
Yeah.
good one. Yep.
yeah, I have the Angler's Wisdom podcast live every Thursday night usually at 8 p.m.
Okay.
I do have a couple of shows that are a little bit earlier because some people schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I also have the kayak fishing roundtable tomorrow over here, and hopefully the ice goes away, so
Yeah.
I can start getting out there and getting people on some fish, or at least get some on the water time.
Very cool.
I guess the most important thing that I'll leave you with is, if you're gonna get into kayak fishing, just think about everything. Think about your family. Think about the things that you don't know that could possibly take your life. And it's not a cool competition. Put your life jacket on. Leave a float plan. Don't get complacent out there, and just like, reach out to somebody that has the experience, and I guarantee you 90% of them are going to be like, look, here's the book,
Mhm.
because we
Yep.
want you to stay alive.
Yeah.
We want you to fish another day. That would be the most important thing, is, like I always say, fishing is life, but safety comes first.
Very good. If you want to find out more about Chuck, you can go to his website, LakeErieKayakFishing.com. He's Chuck Earls.
Hey.
Thank you very much,
Pleasure,
sir.
brother.